Small problem with future is it won't produce sociological phenomena. Small problem with present is it doesn't make sense. People aren't going to buy that. Okay, which is why at every university where they teach biblical criticism, this is what they teach. The past lie. The past lie is beautiful. It works. Watch. If I come to a group of people and I say to them, long ago there was Moses. Then the tradition got lost, there was a gap, and now I, Fred, am coming to give it back to you. But long ago your ancestors heard God speak. What will you tell your kids? Our ancestors heard God speak. And they'll tell their kids, our ancestors heard God speak. And you'll end up with this sociological phenomenon, exactly what we've got. So you see, the past lie could be at the top of that chain. Good so far? So the past lie does not suffer from the problem of the future lie. What was the problem in present lie? In the present lie, the problem is people will believe lies only as long as they're uncheckable. But if they're checkable, people will check them. In past lie, I come to you and I say to you, you didn't hear God speak. And it wasn't your mother or your father. It happened like 500, 1,000, 2,000 years ago. And it's been forgotten in your family until I, Fred, came to give it back to you. Can you check that? No. If you can't check it, then you might believe it. So it turns out the past lie doesn't suffer from the same problem as the present lie. In the present lie, you know I'm lying. In the past lie, there's no way for you to check and see if I'm lying. Therefore, my charisma can start to play an effect. And now I can drag you into a cult. Do you see this? The past lie is the most powerful of all of them. Okay, now, there's a small problem with the past lie. The small problem with the past lie is the following. I brought copies of this for you. I ran an experiment many years ago. We're going now back probably, this is about 20 years ago. I ran this experiment. My experiment has been replicated by many people on the planet. My experiment is on the web, and the replications you can find on the web as well. And many people have done a much better job in the experiment than I did. What I did was this. I went to an Orthodox religious leader here in Jerusalem, famous rabbi. And I said to him, Rabbi, all this Torah that you're teaching people, where did you get it? So the rabbi I'm speaking to, his name was Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe. That was his name. Very famous rabbi. Many of the people here in this building had met him. He passed away now. He said, I got this tradition from my teacher. My teacher's name was Rabbi Yerucham Levavitz of Mir. I said, okay, very interesting. I went and I checked. And I found independent literary sources that described a teacher-student relationship between Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, the man I was speaking to, and Rabbi Yerucham Levavitz of Mir. So I've got now a literary link which supports the story the man is telling me. Then I went back to the man and I said to him, where did Rabbi Yerucham Levavitz get the story? He said he got it from his teacher. Who was his teacher? He says his teacher was Rabbi Simcha Zissel Ziv of Kelemen. So I went and I checked, and I found independent sources all testifying to the existence of a link between Simcha Zissel Ziv of Kelemen and his student, Rabbi Yerucham Levavitz. And I played this game going backwards. And what I did was, every time I found, my rule was 4 independent literary links, I would place a name on the chart. So I've got down here Rabbi Yerucham Levavitz, right? I put death dates on as well. The man who I was speaking to at the time I put this experiment together was still alive, so I didn't put his name down on the bottom, but you could write in here Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, right? Down below that. Then I went searching through the literature, and when I found 4 independent links, I would put a name on a list until I got up to the Bible. When I got up to the Bible, I took the biblical record, and I just wrote down what the Bible said was the chain of transmission until I got up to God at Mount Sinai speaking to Moses. Okay, now, this is what Orthodox Jews believe happened. And I confirmed it from 4 independent literary sources. This is very important, I am not telling you that anything on this sheet is true. I couldn't care less if anything on this sheet is true. What I'm telling you is, this is what Orthodox Jews believe. I proved it from going from Wolbe back 4 independent sources until I got to the biblical record. They all buy the Bible. And then I just wrote down the biblical record of the chain. So this is what they believe. Okay? Now, why is that significant? Because if the original lie would have been Moses, Gap, Fred, let's actually play it out. You're the first generation. I say to you, Moses, Gap, Fred, I'm charismatic, you're gullible, you buy it. You believe Moses, Gap, Fred. What do you tell your child? And what do you tell your child? Moses Gap Fred. And Moses Gap Fred will be the tradition passed all the way down through history. There'll be a story about Moses, a terrible disease, plague, flood, some sort of disaster, where the entire tradition is forgotten for 500, 1,000, 2,000 years. No one remembers Mount Sinai, and then Fred comes back and gives the Torah back again. Here's the problem. The greatest crisis ever in Jewish history would have been the gap, where the entire story of Mount Sinai is forgotten. By the way, when I say the greatest crisis, I'm talking about something that makes the Holocaust look like child's play. Because two kinds of Jews walked out of the Holocaust. Those who said, Mount Sinai happened, and I believe with perfect faith in the Torah, and those who walked out and said, Mount Sinai is a lie, and there is no God. There was no one who walked out of the Holocaust saying, I never heard of Mount Sinai. Nobody. Everyone had heard of Mount Sinai who walked out of the Holocaust. So in order to propose that there was a gap, I, Fred, have got to describe such a disaster that it would seem reasonable that the whole Sinai event would be destroyed. Remember, I'm Fred, I'm the one who's making up this whole lie. The gap and Moses never actually existed. And I'm telling a lie about Moses and the gap coming into existence. And my claim about this gap has got to be, it was like incredibly destructive, such that none of your ancestors ever maintained the mythology. They all lost it. Here's the problem. In all of recorded human history, there is no record of the period when people knew nothing about Mount Sinai. According to these Orthodox Jews, there's a continuous line. They don't have a story about a gap, and even worse. The most important person ever in Jewish history is going to be Moses, because Moses goes up on the mountain, gets the Torah, brings it down, and gives it to the Jews, and they all become Orthodox Jews. The second most important person ever in Jewish history is going to be Fred, because the whole story is forgotten, and Fred restarts the religion. Now, in truth, Fred isn't restarting the religion. Fred is. He's creating the religion, but his claim is that he's restarting it. So he is going to be the second most important person ever in Jewish history because he's the great prophet. He's the man who, after 1,000 or 2,000 years of everyone forgetting about this thing, brought the tradition back to people. Watch this. I stand up in front of university classes and I say to them, graduates and undergraduates, and I say to them, tell me something. What is the name of the person who supposedly went up on Mount Sinai, got the Torah and brought it down, and they all cry out, Moses. Then I say, okay, for people who are getting advanced degrees in Jewish studies, can you tell me, when Moses died, who was the man who took over and led the Jews into the land of Israel? His name was? Joshua, that's correct. Right? Why do they know that? Because Joshua made tremendous literary and historical contributions. That's why we know about him. Okay? Here's a good one. When the Jews went out into Babylonian exile, they were thrown out of Israel, and they survived Babylonian exile and then came back and rebuilt their temple. The man who led them back from Babylonian exile was, does anyone know? It was Ezra. Now, Ezra is extremely famous for what? For bringing the Jews back to the land of Israel and restarting the temple service here. And besides the literary contributions he made. Okay, here's a high-tech question. You probably won't get this unless you're getting a master's or PhD in Jewish studies. Does anyone know the name of the person who redacted the Mishnah? The Mishnah is one of the most famous books of the oral tradition. Judah Hanasi, that's correct, Judah Hanasi. So now, how do we know Judah Hanasi's name? The answer is, he made one of the greatest historical contributions ever to Judaism. He was a great leader, and he wrote the Mishnah. Okay, here's really high tech. I don't expect anyone in this room to get this, but this is going to be hard. Does anyone know the name of the two people who redacted the Talmud? Okay, in a group of people getting a PhD in Jewish studies, they would know. It was Ravina and Rav Ashi. Ravina and Rav Ashi are the two redactors of the Talmud. Now, how do we know that? The answer is, they wrote the Talmud. They're giant. They made huge contributions. Now tell me something. Who made a bigger contribution? Any of those people or Fred, who after 1,000 or 2,000 years of no one knowing anything about Sinai, reintroduced the whole religion to the Jewish nation? Here's the problem. In an otherwise comprehensive Jewish history, there ain't no mention, not a word, about the disaster that wiped out the memory of Sinai or the hero who brought it back again. How did that get cleansed from Jewish history? Why isn't it there? And it's not, by the way, it's not just the Jews who don't know about this gap in Fred. The Christians never heard about the gap in Fred. They think there's a continuous line. The Muslims never heard about the gap in Fred. They think there's a continuous line. The Karaites, a breakoff group, never heard about the gap in Fred. They think there's a continuous line. The Sadducees never heard about the gap in Fred. They thought there was a continuous line. There was never a group of people ever who had contact with Jews who heard about a gap in Fred. So now, again, this is my bias in research coming out. If you would like to say that you believe in past theory, that is, you believe there was a gap in Fred, if you would like to say that, you can, but you must use this language. You must say, I believe in past theory, because it is a total leap of faith. There is not one piece of evidence that ever in history did anyone believe such a thing. Never. So given that, why would I say it? There was not a tradition like that. The first time that anyone ever proposed this was Wellhausen. Wellhausen came and said it was J, E, P, and D, and R. But that was less than 200 years ago. For that means, at this point is the first point when someone says that there was a gap in Fred. And all the Orthodox Jews that he was speaking to said, what are you talking about, a gap in Fred? We don't have a gap anywhere in our history. And all of the documents we have going from here back, they all say there was no gap in Fred. By the way, Wellhausen and followers could not identify who Fred was or where the gap was. And until today, when I lecture on university campuses and I say, ladies, gentlemen, can you please tell me who is Fred? I always get the same response. Someone will stand up and say, well, Fred was Chizkiyahu. And another student will say, it could be Chizkiyahu, it's got to be Yirmiyahu. And so it's not Yirmiyahu, it's Ezra. And this will say, it can't be Ezra, it was Joshua. And you just stand back and they kill each other. And I say, ladies and gentlemen, why are you fighting? And the answer is because in 24 books of the Bible, in 60 volumes of oral tradition, in thousands and thousands of later texts, there is not one mention of a gap or Fred. Therefore, if you want to believe in a gap in Fred, it is complete and utter fantasy, right? You are standing on nothing. It's religion to believe such a thing. Small problem with the future is it will not produce the sociological phenomena we're looking at. Small problem with present is Applewhite theorem. People are dumb, but they're not that dumb. If you tell them a lie, they can be checked, like you just heard God speak. People will say, I don't remember that. Yeah? If you tell them, right, past theory, Moses gap Fred, at some point, there should be a record of a gap in Fred. So if these are the only three ways that this could be a lie, I'm starting to wonder, is this viable? Okay, now, I have proven nothing. I just put evidence on the table, evidence which I think is worthy of serious consideration.